Right, so the final piece of our puzzle was we had MVC, and we've looked at model, which is handling our data, whether our cruddy data, whether we're reading, updating, or deleting our data. We didn't create anything through our model, but we certainly could have. Our views handle just the HTML, the part that our users see. It's provided the data, so it doesn't actually interact with the data directly. It's separated from the model so that they act independently of each other. And so we need somebody in between the two who interacts with the data, but also controls that which the viewer is going to see and make sure that the view gets the data from the database or from whatever your data source might happen to be. And so that is our controller, and that's the topic of this video. And so we have our controller, and the controller then has to do two things. One, it interacts with the database, and so therefore I need to include that database PHP that we saw in our beginning video, which has all of the functions that read and write and connect to our database. Throughout this particular application, I've used this variable action, and action is what helps my controller know what to control, what is being asked of it, so it knows whether I should delete, whether I should show all of the products, what should I be, how do I know how to react? And so I've used action throughout my application. In other words, an action can either come from a GET request, which is right here, or it can come from the POST request. In other words, if I look at this particular page, for example, I have edit equals, or I have delete equals, and if I look at my URL, when I click on one of these, let's say I'm going to delete this 0, which got added in my last video on accident. So if I click on delete, you can see that my action equals DEL. It doesn't really, the ID didn't come over, which is interesting, but anyway, look into that in a moment. Oh, anyway, so that sent over, that link sent over a action key value pair of action equals delete, so that the controller knows, okay, a delete is what my action is. Remember, this is just a user-defined word that I created, but I created a switch statement. You could do this as an if-else, if action equals DEL, but to me, a switch statement was much easier to read. So in that case, the action was not sent over as a post, it was sent over as a GET. So action received that DEL that was in the query string, and so as a result, choose action and tell me which one it was. Well, the controller says it was the DEL, a delete, and so that was sent over as a GET request. So it is getting the ID. That's why that's blank, because that particular record didn't have any ID on it. It was put in there on accident. So there was no ID that was provided. But let's do another one just so I can make sure my example is clear. Let's erase car. So I'm going to delete equals CAR. You can see that the ID was given, the unique ID of that particular record. So action was DEL, so we've got the action. Switch says the action I'm supposed to do is delete, and so the ID was retrieved from the URL string. The ID was sent to that function, delete product. Remember, that's in the database. We saw that in one of the beginning videos that I created. Once that function is finished, it doesn't return anything. It just deleted that item from the database. And then we included the products page, which is what you're seeing here, because the products page is showing all of the remaining products. So that's very clear that that CAR product was deleted. Let's do case equals edit. So the same scenario here, if I hold my cursor up, you can see at the bottom of the screen here, when I move my mouse down, it disappears. But my action equals edit, and my ID, it sends over a unique ID. So if I click on that, then you can see that is sent as a GET request. And so GET request is sent as edit, and then there's an ID given. And so when the controller that went to the controller went and looked and said, well, that is a action of add. So if I look at action of add, oh, it was edit. Let me just verify that. That is an action of edit. That's correct. So therefore this case is correct. So I'm going to get the ID from the query string. I'm going to get all of the products, so that way this page will have all of the product. Oh, it has an individual product, sorry. So an individual product, it has the individual product that it needs to fill in the fields. When we click on update, let's just verify. I'm going to look at, what is that? Update. So that's this page right here that got rendered. So you can see that the fields are being filled in. Action now equals capital update. This is case sensitive, so I needed the capital update in order for it to show up in the button. But I'm still applying that to the action variable, so that when we go back to index, that is now a post request. So this particular statement is running and rendering true. Action is receiving capital update. So now we're in control. Case is update. The update function is going to be rendered. So that's the interaction with the database. It's being received from the post request. Remember, this is sent over as a post request. So let me just double check that. So if we look back at products update, let me have both of these up so I'm not doing one to the other. If I look at products update, it was in fact sent as a method equals post. So when the user clicked on the button update, action got sent over as well with a value of update, which enabled our controller to say, oh, that's an update. I'm good. I will update the product. I know what I'm supposed to do. That database, that model interacts with the database as it's supposed to. And then it's going to once that update is finished, let's change this to 600. Once that update is finished, go ahead and show the products page, which it's doing, and you can see the updated amounts changing there. So let's see, same thing with add. If I go to add and I look at what that URL string was, that's a GET request. Action equals add. So same scenario. It was not a post request, so that rendered false. This renders true then. Action is null, there's nothing in it. So let's check and see if there's a GET request. There was. The GET request is getting the action is now add. So if action now has add in it. So if I go down to add, we're displaying the product add page, which would be this one. So that's basically a blank form. When the blank form is finished, we have an action equals capital add, so we know that this is now a post request. And so our controller then will be rendered again. The controller will look to see, well, now I do have an action in it. That was a post request. Action will now be capital add. So it comes down to this case. Adds the product. Remember, that's the global post array is available, so the add product will have the information that it needs to add that to the database, and then go ahead and view the products. So this becomes our controller then. It does all of the work between calling the appropriate model functions to interact with the database, and then to display the appropriate views that needed to be created, as in my case, as a result of my changing the action variable. So again, this wasn't intended to be a how-to, it was intended to be a review of what we went over to give us a starting point of where we can start when class starts up next time. So I will also include the source code with all of this, so hopefully you are following along and this makes sense. If not, don't feel shy to reach out and ask, but this is a good starting point of where we left off.